address us that has not done so, that was not recognized, that had previously filled out a card? Or does everyone pretty much feel like you have expressed yourself on this issue one way or the other? Then I'm going to close the public comment portion of this meeting, and it is now a matter for this council to debate and act upon. Mr. Jordan.
Well, first of all, there are a lot of things, some things that in God's world that I will never understand how they progress. The one thing I do understand, the one thing I do know is that everybody who spoke today spoke from their heart, from deep-rooted beliefs, and I thank you for being collegial and speaking what you believe to be the right thing. To Esther Tucker, who I consider one of the best men I've ever known, and to the Human Relations Council, I thank you for bringing forth your recommendations. I'm not clear in my mind how we transition from the Rainbow Lounge to many of the recommendations. The recommendations before the Human Relations Council, I understand, have been under consideration for over a year, and we've transitioned to a point where we are. We all have deep-rooted beliefs. We can stand at the podium and say that it's important to separate government and church. I can tell you from my 61 years on earth, it is extremely difficult for me to separate what I believe to be freedoms, beliefs, rights, entitlements, morals, values. I don't know how you separate what you've grown up to believe in, what you've grown up to stand for. I will tell you one thing as an American, as a Christian, as a Fort Worthian, I abhor discrimination against any individual or any group to exercise their right to pursue happiness, their right to express the American way. Quite frequently we defer to labels, and we try to label things in life as to what should be and couldn't be, and you know, one of the labels that we've talked about today is the LGBT designation. Quite frankly, I don't know that I had even heard of that label before the Rainbow Lounge existed, so maybe there's an enlightenment here that comes about that. I've read the complete report of the Rainbow Lounge. I wasn't there. I have complete confidence that Chief Jeff Halstead, in having done the right thing and thoroughly investigated this matter. I do think that there are some, because each and every council member on this dais received over 500 emails within about a week to 10 days after that occurred. Some of those were not very nice. Some were just asking for help and looking for the right answer. So I do believe we all here tonight have addressed this maturely and expressed our beliefs. In addressing, again, the Human Relations Council has looked at this policy that's before us tonight for over a year. They've had time to draw distinctions in the definitions that were before us. I know that the council has only seen this for a matter of days, and I've tried in every way I know to educate myself on this, because from my heart I do not want to discriminate in any way or fashion against anybody's right to pursue happiness. But I will tell you that some of the questions that I had regarding the terminology in the resolution, in the ordinance before us today, I could not draw, by reading the definitions repeatedly, I could not draw the distinctions between the word transgender, gender identity, and gender expression. In looking at what many Fortune 500 companies have enacted in our nation, the word gender identity, gender expression was used, and the word transgender was not in that what I saw. I asked, could we delay this? Because, quite frankly, I want to make sure we do the right thing. I will tell you that I am very concerned about the rabbit path that we follow and come down. What's before us today, on the surface, is an anti-discrimination ordinance. There is not an American that truly is an American. There is not a Christian that truly is a Christian. And whatever religion you happen to be, and I've looked at that in detail because that is one of the freedoms that we can express. And I've looked at definitions of what the golden rule is, and it's expressed in virtually every religion there is. And that is, love your neighbor. Treat them with the same respect that you expect. I mean, to me, it's Matthew 22:37 through 40, the two most important laws that were given to follow in Christianity. I come to the conclusion that I'm very concerned with what's before us today. There are many of the recommendations of the task force, which I consider to be a focus group, because I don't know that it was truly a diverse group that looked at this. I understand why it was looked at, and I understand the need. But quite frankly, I am very concerned about the rabbit path of going down, and I'm going to have to vote against this ordinance.
Over the past few days, I have sifted through countless emails and calls about this issue. And through it all, I thought a lot about my good friend, the late great Councilmember Chuck Silcox. A few years ago, when he was faced with including language that would prevent discrimination against sexual orientation in the city, I know that vote was very difficult for Mr. Silcox. But he voted that night to ensure that people would not be discriminated against, and that is what I will do tonight. I'm reminded this late hour of the words of our President Obama, who spoke to the Human Rights Campaign dinner in October of this year, and he stated, and I quote, "It is no secret that progress has been incredibly difficult. We can see with the time and dedication it took to pass hate crime legislation. But these issues also go to the heart of who we are as a people. Are we a nation that can transcend old attitudes and worn divides? Can we embrace our differences and look to the hopes and dreams that we share? Can we uphold the ideals on which this nation was founded, that all of us are equal, that all of us deserve the same opportunity to live our lives freely and pursue our chance at happiness? I believe we can. I believe we will." As Esther Pepper stated earlier tonight, we treat others as we want to be treated. And with that, I respectfully move for approval.
Second. Heard the motion and second. We continue with discussion.
This has been both a historical journey and a personal journey for me to get to this point. From a historical perspective, I went back and looked at the founding principles upon which this nation was founded. From a personal perspective, I went back to what my parents, mentors, teachers, and people of positive impact in my life have taught me. From a historical perspective, I went back to the teachings of John Locke, the great English philosopher, whose writings form really the basis for our Declaration of Independence and U.S. Constitution. John Locke argued basically that we should respect civil society and also the religious order. There were ecclesiastical bodies that were separate from civil society. That led, of course, and influenced the views of our founders of our country, men like Jefferson and Madison, that were concerned about our country establishing a state religion while at the same time respecting the freedom of expression, the freedom to worship. In America today, we do not have a state religion. And throughout moments of crisis in our country, there has always been great tension between those people of deeply held religious views that were resistant to some of the more progressive views. If you recall, in our Constitution, certain individuals were only counted as 3/5. It took the Civil War that led eventually to the abolition of slavery. It took a civil war that led to the rights expressed in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Then we had Jim Crow. It took the 19th Amendment to give women the right to vote. It took the 1964 Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, and the 1965 Voting Rights Act to end Jim Crow. It took the 1973 Rehabilitation Act and the American with Disabilities Act in the 90s to prohibit discrimination on the basis of disability. And throughout our land today, we are faced with these issues dealing with how do we treat people for who they are and what they are. And based on the history of this country, I say that we move forward. I say that we hold true to what is granted in a civil society must be fair to all citizens, all residents, and at the same time we respect the deeply held religious views of those people of faith that have come today to express their values. Nothing in this ordinance changes or mandates the changes on those values. If you look at the ordinance, it specifically provides religious exemptions. If you are a church or work for a religious organization, you can still require that all applicants and employees conform to the religious tenets of such organization. If you look at the fair housing provision, a church can require in a dwelling that it occupies that people be of the same religion. It does not have to be one or the other. We can still have religious liberty in this country, and we can still treat people the same. Everyone is equal. I look back to the way I was raised. My mom and dad always taught me to respect other individuals. My faith taught me the same thing. Growing up, you hear slurs, you hear hateful words, and then my dad and my mom taught me to stand up against that. And how I regret in those occasions when I remained silent, was I really approving of not only the hateful words, but of the hateful conduct. Words do matter, actions matter. And I think today what this ordinance does is basically say to all the citizens and residents of Fort Worth that no discrimination will be tolerated. To me, I believe that the terms transgender, gender expression, and gender identity have been accurately defined by the hard work of the Human Relations Commission, the Diversity Task Force. I want to commend all those that have been involved in that. I am reminded of the phrase that many used during the Civil Rights Movement, just wait, don't rush. And I remember, I believe it was Dr. King that said, a right delayed is a right denied. I remember that Dr. King in the Civil Rights Movement taught us that the underlying principle of equal rights and nonviolence was love of fellow men and women. And I think that is what we are doing here tonight. I am reminded also that as we move forward, that every time we stand up for ideals, for principles of diversity being a strength, inclusiveness, equal opportunity to all, it makes our community better, it makes our city better, our county, our state, and our country. So I will be voting in favor of this ordinance change to make sure that no citizen, no resident of Fort Worth is treated unfairly and discriminated against. Thank you.
Mr. Burdett?
I'm still here. But I confess I'm getting a little weary. I'm sure everyone is. First, let me commend everybody who's here participated in this debate. We've had a great deal of diversity. We've enjoyed it. Viewpoints presented, and I think they were well forwarded. We heard remarks of intelligence, remarks of passion, and remarks of sincerity. I don't personally think that this government or any citizen of this government should ever discriminate against another person because of their choice. I think that's part of our country, freedom of choice. What I have heard today, though, is that people have some fear that their choice will be detrimental to them in our society by people who don't share that choice. And I've heard both ways here. I've heard people who are in favor of this ordinance talk about discrimination because of the choices they've made. And I've heard people who have spoken against the ordinance talk about discrimination and approbation because of their choice to oppose it. I was really saddened to hear believe that the people who might oppose this ordinance are wrong, that they're fear-mongering, or motivated by hatred and are zealots. I don't think that kind of language helps solve the problem. And I strongly believe that we ought not to have discrimination in this city. I am saddened by the fact that we have to consider a law to bring that about. I wish we had no discrimination because people's hearts wouldn't permit them to do that. But this ordinance we have before us here tonight is the work of the commission. I think as Mr. Tucker said, it took maybe a year, certainly at least 6 months to do that. And although I believe in the principle of no discrimination, I can't vote for this ordinance tonight. Not because I'm against it, but because I want more time. This is a very crucial issue, and I don't want to try to decide it in 3 days' time. And that's as long as I've seen this. I don't want to decide it without hearing from more people. I've gotten 50 or 60 emails about this matter. So I think I agree with the lady Beverly, I believe it was, who said that everybody needs to be at the table and have a little chat. That's what we had this evening. And I hope and I think everybody on both sides of this issue have a greater respect for those that have a contrary view. But I think we need more time. I also think that this ordinance, whether we like it or not, is tangled up and enmeshed with the 20 recommendations from the task force. I know a lot of people have directed their comments at both of them, and I personally feel that they are intertwined. I think it's the same issue, and I think they all deal with the same issue, and I think they ought to be taken together. So that's why I can't support voting on it. I would like to abstain because I would like some more time, but I'm not allowed to do that. I've got to vote one way or another. That's why I was put up here. But I think the communications we've heard tonight from our citizens made it really clear that this ordinance and the task force recommendations present issues which may be more crucial even than the tough budget we just went through. And so that's why I think we need to take more time. I think we have the obligation to first determine what our role is when it comes to defining, guiding, and mandating the conduct of our citizens. And we are mandating it anytime we pass an ordinance to some extent, more or less. That was not the role of the task force to do that, but that's our role as the elected council. And here's some of the questions that we have to face. I think it will take more time if we do that. First, should we declare that non-discrimination and respect for divergent views and groups who define those views is the policy of the city and to guide the city's actions? I hope we do take that position. I think that's where it comes from. And we've already done that with the ordinance we have on the books that we're addressing tonight. But what's currently on our ordinance deal with a lot of more objective factors than I think we're looking at in this amendment. And if we now extend our non-discrimination ordinance to cover gender orientations and as defined, should we go even further by taking actions that might, under the task force recommendations, be deemed to facilitate, affirm, validate, justify, and endorse those who practice a lifestyle encompassed by the LGBT logo. And I think what we've heard tonight is some people fear that's what we would be doing. Obviously, I think some people might even say if we fail to adopt this ordinance, it's tantamount to an act of condemnation on the part of this council. But let's understand that neither this council nor the federal government are constitutionally permitted to endorse any religion. Few would argue that restriction is a condemnation of any or all religions. Is there or should there be a line drawn between non-discrimination on the one hand and endorsement on the other hand? And those questions bother me, not only drawing the line, but the question that bothers me are some of the language in this amendment and endorsement. I mean, we've heard people say they view it that way, they think of it that way. They may be right, they may be wrong, but it's an issue we've got to face. Because I think these of creating a serious and undesirable schism among our citizens. And we saw some of that here tonight, although I would hope that listening to the other side has modified that somewhat. The strong views are held and frequently lead to disputes regarding individual rights under an open government versus moral views. While declaring a non-discrimination policy, are we in danger of dictating moral precepts which must be embraced by all of our citizens? And these questions aren't really philosophical quandaries. I think they go to the very heart of the actions which are before us, and to the very heart of the task force measures which are urged upon the council. And whether a homosexual or gender described lifestyle is a matter of choice or a matter of birth, it is one which should be recognized and respected as a part of a diverse society. First, because we live in a country founded and sustained on freedom of choice, so long as that choice does not visit such harm upon others that is recognized as criminal conduct. Second, a psychic created birth should not in any enlightened society serve to condemn an individual any more than color or other physical trait. So, we are set here for non-discrimination. There's no question about that. So how do we affirm the freedom of choice and civil respect for every segment of our society without crossing the line and mandating acceptance of conduct which infringes upon the individual's freedom to hold and express contrary views derived from moral precepts or other beliefs? And where in that divide do each of the task force recommendations fall? I want more time to try to answer these questions. And if we do not carefully accomplish that balance, I'm afraid we will create more, not less, tolerance of those who have suffered already unwarranted discrimination. These matters deserve our careful study, deliberation, and open debate. So I would propose that we have the patience, the leadership, and political courage to engage in a candid workshop and get through these issues. Here again, I know work has been done and countless hours have been spent by the commission and by the task force. But we, the 9 of us, are the ones who've got to make this decision because that's our job. So I think we have that duty to deliberate. I don't think my colleagues up here agree with me on more time, but I think we need it, and therefore I'm going to vote against passing this ordinance tonight.
Well,
I think what we're talking about is looking at an amendment to the anti-discrimination ordinance that prohibits discrimination in place of public accommodation, employment, housing on the basis of transgender, gender expression, and gender identity. And that's pretty much saying that any person ought to have the right in order to move around and experience the same thing as anyone else without being discriminated against because of the way they dress or because of the way they express themselves. It has nothing to do, and we're not talking about anything that happens behind closed doors where persons have other relationships. What we're talking about within the public arena. And I think within the public arena there should not be discrimination. And I'm opposed to it, and that's the reason I will be supporting this amendment.
John?
I'd like to first draw a contrast between some of the issues I think that swelled out of the Rainbow Lounge and this, because they are separate. One, this was working its way through the Human Relations Commission before that event ever occurred. Second, John, you talked about the tenor, and certainly the tenor has been a bit more civil tonight and surrounding this issue really than it was around the Rainbow Lounge. There's been talk about fear or seeing hatred in the eyes of some. I will tell you that individually and as a group, after the Rainbow Lounge, we were called backward, redneck, ignorant, homophobic. We were accused of intentionally targeting gays to be beat up and drug out of bars. None of that was true. favor of discriminating against anyone. I think we have, at this point, an ordinance that is pretty workable. I'll tell you, and I shared with my counsel earlier, it happens really weekly that people discriminate or against folks who have disabilities. The six chose to walk around and go in the back door with me at the Austin Club last spring when I couldn't go in the front door because there were steps. We went through the kitchen. Went to a meeting last week at a well-known restaurant in Fort Worth. Was told by the management they were sorry, but they had scheduled the meeting in a room downstairs. There was nothing to stairs that way. If they'd like, they could carry me down. I said, no, thank you. So I know it's discrimination because it's not intentional always. It certainly wasn't hateful. But it's just a lack of consideration. I don't want that for anybody. And I also want to have a distinction between discrimination based on sexual orientation and what we're talking about tonight, which is specifically transgender, gender expression, and gender identity. And I would vote with Mr. Burdett to delay this so that we could look at it and investigate it more. I know that we have dealt with things like large animal ordinance, a conservation district, gas wells, lots of issues where we didn't have as much disparity of opinion as we have tonight and in our emails, and we have continued them once, twice, 3 times. I certainly don't want to spend, 4 hours, 4.5 hours necessarily, but I want this thing to be well vetted. I want it to be something that we can all work with. My concerns, I think, for the ordinance and the changes that we're making are much more mundane than for some of the reasons that there might be for supporting it. Certainly, Mr. Espino and Ms. Hicks have been very eloquent in their support. I'm not going to quote Thomas Jefferson or even President Obama, but my concern is that the general public who doesn't have, and I'm talking about small business people, who don't have the resources for HR lawyers, for a lot of legal expertise, for the ability to try to understand all of the implications of gender expression, gender identity, and transgender. As someone said, it may be really hard to know whether you are or are not. And if you have no idea that the person that you're dealing with may have some sort of a gender identity issue, but that person thinks that you did, they can still go to the Human Relations Commission, they can still file charges or claims, and you can find yourself in court for something that you had no idea you were engaging in some kind of discrimination. It may have been a misunderstanding. So I think that's very difficult. I'd like an opportunity to work through that a little bit with some of our employers in the area, with some of the folks who live in my district. I don't see why we would, if this is as important as it seems to me, and I think ending discrimination of any person in the city of Fort Worth is important. If it's that important, I think we could wait a week or two and have an opportunity to vet this a little bit further. That's my opinion.
Burns? Here in a few weeks, few short weeks, we will start a new year. And I will start my 3rd year on the City Council. It has been an interesting 2 years. I want to, before I comment on this ordinance, I want to talk about the 8 individuals who serve with me as members on this council. Even those who will be voting against this ordinance, I want everyone watching tonight and everyone here tonight to know that I have a deep and very sincere pride and appreciation to these colleagues who demonstrate through their actions the convictions of their words. Their commitment is to an open, friendly, inclusive Fort Worth, which never fails to give us every economic opportunity available, and they are careful stewards of our citizens' tax dollars in good faith. I've sat through many an executive session where I've heard them anguish over some of the choices that we make. In my conversations with them over this past week and weekend and today, have heard some of that same anguish in some of their voices about the choices and the votes we will make tonight. I also want to say how very proud I am of Fort Worth, and that I'm proud to be a citizen of this city. Progress like what I believe we will embark on tonight is not possible without the hard work and dedication of great citizens and a number of friends, and I have friends here tonight on both sides of this issue. I particularly want to thank our Human Relations Commission Chairman, Mr. Estes Tucker, who is always amazingly eloquent, and I appreciate the good work that he has done. I also want to thank my friend and neighbor, and the very dedicated and talented Aggie engineer, Lisa Thomas, who is my appointee to this commission. And I also don't want to go without thanking the hard work of Dale Fissler, who undertook a chore that he may not have wanted to take on. And also thank Dale Fissler, who provided incredible guidance and coherence and thoughtfulness in helping lead this group as a staff member. I also want to thank all the legal staff and everyone involved in the diversity task force and these citizens groups, and obviously Fairness Fort Worth and others who have been at the table throughout all of this. I am not going to quote any presidents tonight, but I do want to quote some of you who stood before this dais and with some of the notes that I made tonight. John Nelson talked about the uncertainty of the law. The reason we're doing this is to provide clarity. We're writing this so that people have a clear understanding of what you can and can't discriminate against in Fort Worth, and that we are saying that you can't discriminate based on gender identity and expression. I also want to once again reference Estes. He challenged us that this is the right thing to do, and I'm saying to my colleagues, it's the right thing for us to move forward on this tonight. And lastly, I want to reference Joan Klein, whose words I always adhere to because she's always right. She challenged all of us to take courage, and it is courage that we will all need in making this vote tonight, regardless of whether it's yes or no. There is strength in our diversity. There's one other quote that I jotted down here. One of my colleagues mentioned that they're saddened that we must bring laws within discrimination. Unfortunately, that is the case. I encourage my colleagues to take courage and to do the right thing and to pass this amendment tonight.
Zimmerman. I've been on the council for 5 months. I'd like to go back and work on the budget. Tonight we've heard from both sides, and both have eloquently and forcefully stated their positions. In this world, we tend to try and think in black and white, but we live in a gray world. I share somewhat Mr. Burdett's feelings about the wording, but I also recognize in reality we used to have a saying in my business that we're changing happy to glad. We could probably wordsmith this for 2 or 3 weeks, and I don't know that we'd have any better solution than we have tonight. I've got friends that are straight, I've got friends that are gay. I respect them all equally. I believe that there should be no discrimination. So if we wanted to change the wording, instead of based on age, race, color, etc., we could just say based on anything. Now, there was a gentleman that said that the way we have this worded right now would lead to difficulties in dealing with litigation. I don't think if we use the word anything, that would help to clarify it in any manner at all either. Somebody pointed out that words won't change our feelings and our culture, and they're right. Words alone are powerful, but it's not what we say that is important. It's what we do. You can talk all day long about what you believe, but if you don't act out that belief, then it becomes apparent to everybody. I find this a very difficult decision, but I don't believe that anybody should be discriminated against for any reason. We all make choices in our life, and we're defined by those choices. I'm not sure that we should be punished for those choices. One of the problems that I see is that we have become groups. And I get one of these recordings, and the first thing it says is press 1 for English. There are a lot of inequities in this world. Tonight we're being faced with another one of those. I believe that we could measure and work on this for a long time and not make everybody happy. And therefore, I'm willing to go in support of this amendment and then see if we've made a mistake or not. And as I do that, I would appreciate and challenge you to help go make this work. You know, we can make mistakes up here just like you can make them out there. I heard somebody kind of laugh a little bit when I said whether we made a mistake or not. Sometimes you cannot determine whether you've made a mistake or not until you go do it. So we're going to have to work together. Because if we don't, then we are not going to be the all-inclusive people that we believe we really want to be. Therefore, I'm going to go in support of this movement.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard each member of this dais express themselves tonight. You haven't heard any arguments up here on this dais. You've heard the respect we all have for each other. I think that's been demonstrated by everyone that's in this room tonight, some who have already left us. And I want to thank all of you for the way you conducted yourself. It was a far different tribe tonight than the last time we met. And yet at the same time, I think you can see we take care of business. This council does not ignore our challenges. We face those challenges. That is not to say we always agree. I think both sides have clearly expressed their concerns tonight. Certainly, Esdras and the commissioners worked long and hard on this issue, long before the Rainbow Lounge maybe even opened its doors. I don't know when it opened. But I know that this wasn't a part of that debate. This was going on long before that. Why? Because there have been cases. There have been cases where folks have tried to get these concerns addressed, and we're not able to. They couldn't. Tonight has been an education for me. I've listened to individuals. I've listened to mothers, fathers, teacher, grandmother, 6 grandchildren. So I have listened very carefully tonight. You always have. You have had our undivided attention, haven't you? You haven't seen it. We have all listened very carefully. And I have read this proposed change in our ordinance very carefully, as all of us have. We know what it says. You've got it right there on the big board in front of you. We know what that subject is. I've often referred to our city, not only as a city of inclusion, but in order to better define that, I've said the day I got here, as your mayor almost 6.5 years ago, that our diversity in this city is our strength, not a weakness. And I don't know how many cities can say that, and that's not my problem. My problem and yours is right here. Make sure that everyone understands that. To make sure that everyone understands that. I must say that tonight I have seen just how diverse this Fort Worth family is. I don't intend to quote scripture, presidents, or anybody else. What I do intend to do is to vote tonight based on what I have learned by those who raised me, by those mentors who are no longer here to mentor me. I think we probably all had some of those that have left lessons behind. And by what I have learned in 30 years of public service. And that's a pretty easy lesson. That's a pretty easy lesson. I don't question why God does what He does. And I'll be the first to tell you, I don't always agree with everything He does. Especially when He takes away a loved one or a family member earlier than I would like. Or He takes away a dear friend. Or He's in the process of taking away someone very close to me as we speak. I don't agree with that. But I don't question Him. I don't question Him. I don't question Him about why He does what He does, nor am I going to question what I'm going to do. Because my measures are twofold. Same two questions I ask myself before I vote on anything that comes before us, this dais, or anything else that I do. Is it the right thing to do, and am I doing it for the right reason? Those are the two questions. Now tonight, that could be water that is easily muddled. It could be voting for the right thing for the wrong reason, or voting for the wrong thing for the right reason, depending on who you've listened to and how you feel. If it's the right thing for the right reason, that's the way I vote, that's the way I act, and I make no apologies. It's because I believe in here that's the right thing to do. I would venture to say that probably everyone here has learned a little bit more than they knew before they walked in this door tonight about how people feel, how strongly they believe, their concerns, their fears. But what I also know is we don't allow things to divide us in this city. We never have. That's why we're as strong as we are, and that's why we continue to grow. That's why. I don't agree with some of the lifestyles that have been shared tonight. It's not my choice. That is not my choice. Straight. Your first lady is straight. All of our children are straight, and our grandchildren are straight. Best of my knowledge, our great-grandson is too. But I submit that there's not going to be a huge change in Fort Worth if this council passes this ordinance. I don't think there's going to be an in-your-face to anyone who lives in Fort Worth that we wanted, you didn't, and this is what we're going to shove down your throat. I would be very surprised and most disappointed if that were to happen. And I think that is something that is not going to be a part of the 4-4 plan. So I will be supporting this proposal tonight, to work with this commission, my fellow colleagues, but I will also tell you that I respect the opinion of those who oppose whatever action we take, whether they are on this dais or not. That too is the 4-1 plan. Question is on the motion. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
There being 6 ayes, 3 noes, the motion carries. Momentarily, but I want to inform you that we are going to change a couple of things on the agenda. We're going to take up immediately as we come back M&C